For centuries, scientists have asked one question that nobody could answer. Where do Albanians really come from? Some experts believe they're the last living descendants of the ancient Illyrians. Others think their roots stretch back even further, to the very first people who ever set foot in Europe. But here's what makes this story different. DNA technology has finally given us answers, and what researchers discovered will change everything you thought you knew about European history. Modern Albanians carry genetic secrets in their blood that connect them to civilizations most people have never even heard of. Scientists found markers so rare and so ancient that even they couldn't believe the results at first. What you're about to hear isn't speculation or theory. These are facts confirmed by laboratories across Europe, and the implications are absolutely stunning. Right now, about 5 to 6 million Albanians live around the world. Most in Albania and Kosovo, with large communities in North Macedonia, Montenegro, Greece, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and the United States. But their location isn't what makes them extraordinary. What truly sets Albanians apart is something you can hear the moment they speak. The Albanian language is unlike anything else in Europe. It doesn't belong to the Slavic family, not to Greek, not even to Latin. It stands completely alone, an ancient survivor with no close relatives. Think about that for a second. In a continent where languages blend and borrow from each other constantly, Albanian remained isolated, untouched, almost frozen in time. Long before modern nations existed, the Western Balkans were home to a people called the Illyrians. They lived in what is now Albania, Montenegro, Bosnia, and parts of Croatia. These weren't simple farmers. They were warriors, traders, and seafarers who shaped the ancient world. For generations, Albanians believed they descended directly from these Illyrians, but historians argued endlessly about it. Some claimed Albanians arrived much later. Others insisted they were heavily mixed with Slavs, Greeks, and countless others. The debate seemed endless, with no way to prove anything. But then something changed. Scientists began extracting DNA from ancient Illyrian skeletons found buried in Balkan graves, and what they discovered next shocked the entire scientific community. Researchers compared the ancient Illyrian DNA with the DNA of modern Albanians living today. The results were absolutely stunning. A powerful genetic connection exists that nobody expected to find. Modern Albanians are genetically closer to the ancient Illyrians than anyone else alive on Earth right now. This means Albanians are one of the very few peoples in Europe still living in their original ancestral homeland after thousands of years. But the story gets even more interesting when you consider what happened in the Balkans over the centuries. This region has always been a crossroads of empires and invasions. The Greeks ruled in the south. The Romans marched through and conquered everything. The Byzantines built their empires across the land. Slavic tribes moved in during the Middle Ages. Later, the Ottoman Empire arrived and stayed for centuries. With so many conquests and so much mixing, you would absolutely expect Albanian DNA to look like a chaotic patchwork of different peoples. Yet scientists found something they never anticipated. Albanians actually maintained a surprising level of genetic continuity through all of it. Despite centuries of empires controlling their lands, their core DNA remains strongly connected to those ancient Balkan ancestors. Yes, you can find traces of other peoples in their genes, Greek, Roman, Ottoman, but far less than anyone expected. The Albanians, unlike so many of their neighbors, carried their genetic roots more steadily across thousands of years. That's extremely unusual in Europe, where massive migrations and brutal wars often completely replaced entire populations. Now let me tell you about what makes Albanian DNA truly unique in ways scientists never imagined. One of the most common genetic markers found in Albanians is called EV13. The technical name doesn't matter, but what it represents will blow your mind. It's one of the oldest genetic signatures of the Balkans, a marker that appears again and again in Albanian men today. It links directly to people who walked these same lands thousands of years ago, long before written history began. Some scientists even call it the Balkan signature, because of where it originated. But here's the truly surprising part that changes everything. Albanians carry this marker at a much higher rate than any of their neighbors. This means their DNA isn't just ancient, it's also distinct, separate, uniquely preserved. So when people argue that Albanians are basically the same as other Balkan peoples, DNA tells a completely different story. It reveals deep, unique roots that go back further than most European populations can trace. Of course, DNA research isn't just about science in the Balkans. It's about politics, identity, and centuries of bitter arguments. For generations, Albanians, Greeks, and Serbs have fought over one question: who was here first? Who owns the ancient legacy of this land? When DNA studies began showing that Albanians have a powerful genetic link to the Illyrians, many Albanians celebrated the findings as proof of their ancient heritage. But others pushed back hard, saying DNA cannot possibly be the final word on identity. Some genetic results even showed that Albanians are genetically closer to Greeks than to Slavs, which created heated debates across the entire region. Legends have always claimed that Albanians are among the oldest Europeans. Some scholars connect them to the mysterious Pelasgians, a people who supposedly lived in Greece before the Greeks themselves arrived. Others link them to the Thracians, or even to the Minoans of ancient Crete. Science can't confirm everything these legends claim, but DNA does show absolutely fascinating connections that nobody can ignore. Some Albanians carry genetic markers linked to early Greek populations that existed before classical Greece. Others connect to Thracians and ancient Balkan tribes that history has almost forgotten. What this evidence means is simple, but profound. Albanians didn't just appear out of nowhere 1,000 years ago. Their roots go deep into Europe's ancient past, deeper than most nations can prove. Their DNA carries the echoes of civilizations that vanished long ago. Genetic studies consistently place them close to southern Europeans, especially Italians and Greeks. They stand clearly apart from northern Slavs, showing a fundamental difference in their origins. Even the Albanian diaspora, living in Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and the United States, still carries these ancient markers in their blood. After generations living abroad, their DNA still links them directly back to the Balkans in ways that science can measure and prove. So, whether you meet an Albanian in New York or Rome, their genetic story remains the same: ancient roots carried forward into the modern world. Now let me share the most shocking truths that scientists discovered when they dug deeper into this mystery. Albanians are among the most genetically continuous populations in all of Europe. While other groups were replaced or heavily mixed over centuries of invasions, Albanians remained powerfully tied to their ancient ancestors. Their DNA shows extraordinary resilience that researchers rarely see. Despite endless conquests, brutal invasions, and constant migration pressure, the ancient genetic core stayed alive and intact. Albanians today carry more Illyrian DNA than even the most optimistic scientists expected to find. This doesn't just confirm old beliefs and ancient legends. It makes them one of the last living bridges to Europe's Bronze Age. When you talk about the Illyrians, it's important to imagine the world they actually lived in over 2,000 years ago. The Illyrians stretched across the Western Balkans in dozens of different tribes. They were not a single unified nation, but a collection of peoples sharing similar cultures and languages. Some lived by the coast, sailing the Adriatic and trading with Greeks and Romans. Others lived deep in the mountains, known throughout the ancient world for their toughness and fierce independence. The Greeks wrote about them as formidable neighbors you didn't want to cross. The Romans fought bloody wars against them for decades before finally conquering their lands through sheer military force. Yet, even after centuries living under Roman rule, the Illyrian spirit somehow remained alive. Many Roman emperors were actually Illyrian by birth, including Diocletian and Constantine's father. This shows you how deeply Illyrians shaped European history, even after their kingdoms fell. When the Roman Empire finally collapsed, massive waves of new peoples swept across the Balkans like a flood. Slavic tribes moved in during the early Middle Ages, and in most places they either mixed with or completely replaced the older populations. But in the highlands of Albania, something completely different happened that changed everything. The people there, protected by towering mountains, deep valleys, and a culture built on survival, preserved their language and identity against impossible odds. This geographic isolation may explain exactly why Albanians show such powerful continuity with the ancient Illyrians. Then came the Ottoman Empire, one of history's greatest powers. For centuries, much of the Balkans fell under Ottoman control. New religions arrived, new customs spread, and even new migrations came with the conquerors. But once again, the DNA story reveals something absolutely clear. Albanians absorbed some cultural influences, of course, but their genetic core remained fundamentally unchanged through it all. They carried their Illyrian blood through empires, through wars, through centuries of upheaval that would have destroyed most peoples. And here's where the mystery deepens even further. The Pelasgians, said to be the oldest people of the entire region, appear in ancient myths as the very first Europeans. Some Albanian scholars believe their people are the direct descendants of these Pelasgians. If true, that would make them even older than the ancient Greeks themselves. DNA cannot yet prove this incredible claim, But the survival of such an ancient and completely unique language does hint at deep prehistoric roots that science is only beginning to understand. Even the Thracians, who lived further east in what is now Bulgaria, leave mysterious echoes in Albanian heritage, specific words, unusual customs, and even rare genetic markers connect Albanians to this almost forgotten people. Albanian DNA doesn't just tie them to one single group. It forms a complex web reaching across the Balkans and beyond, touching civilizations that existed thousands of years before modern nations were even imagined. Think about this for just a moment. When an Albanian looks in the mirror today, they may be looking at a face not too different from their ancestors who walked these exact same lands 3,000 years ago. That kind of continuity is extraordinarily rare in Europe, where so many populations were violently shifted, heavily mixed, or completely erased by history. This is exactly why scientists call the Albanian case truly extraordinary. Their DNA isn't just about bloodlines and genetic markers. It's about survival through unimaginable time. It's about a people holding on to their identity when history itself tried to wash it away. Every people on Earth, no matter how unique, carry traces of connection with others. We are all part of one larger human family in the end. Still, for Albanians, the DNA story carries enormous power. When you think about identity, DNA is definitely one part of the story. But language is another kind of genetic code entirely. In the case of Albanians, their language is like a living fossil, surviving when almost everything else in the Balkans was completely erased. The Albanian language doesn't neatly fit with Greek, Slavic, or Latin families. It sits alone, an independent branch of the great Indo-European family tree. For linguists, this is both absolutely fascinating and deeply puzzling. How did a language so ancient, so fragile-looking, manage to endure through centuries of invasions that destroyed countless others? Some experts say its survival is proof of the people's incredible determination. Others believe the mountains of Albania acted as a natural shield, locking the language away from the great linguistic storms that swept across Europe repeatedly. This survival has profound consequences nobody anticipated. Every single word in Albanian carries whispers of deep time. Some linguists claim certain words may trace back directly to the speech of the Illyrians, or even earlier to the mysterious Pelasgians, who roamed the Balkans long before anyone wrote anything down. If that's actually true, then speaking Albanian today is like hearing an echo of voices that lived thousands upon thousands of years ago. But language is only part of this incredible picture. Geography plays a crucial role too. Look at any map of Albania. Mountains absolutely dominate the landscape. Sharp peaks, deep valleys, winding rivers everywhere. This rugged terrain created natural barriers that protected communities. Invaders may have passed through the lowlands, but the highland villages often remained completely untouched by outside forces. In these isolated places, families lived generation after generation with almost no outside influence whatsoever. DNA studies confirm this pattern with hard evidence. Some genetic markers in Albanians show extraordinary continuity preserved by the geography itself. The land acted like a vault, protecting not only language and culture, but also bloodlines that would have vanished anywhere else. This phenomenon isn't unique to Albania, though. Across Europe, there are a few other peoples who preserve their ancient roots against all odds. One famous comparison is with the Basques of northern Spain and southern France. Like Albanians, the Basques speak a unique language with absolutely no close relatives anywhere. Their DNA shows unusual continuity that fascinates researchers. Scientists often call the Basques and Albanians time capsules of Europe, two peoples living far apart, but united by a similar fate. Anthropologists who study Albanian traditions often find traces of the pre-Christian and pre-Islamic world still alive. Ancient sun rituals, seasonal celebrations, mythic symbols that echo beliefs far older than Rome or Byzantium. In a way, culture functions exactly like DNA. It carries memories forward through time, even when written history is completely silent. Consider the polyphonic singing of southern Albania, now recognized by UNESCO as culturally significant. Its haunting, layered voices sound to modern ears strange, even otherworldly. Yet scholars believe it may preserve echoes of ancient communal chants, sung by tribes long before Albania existed as a nation. When Albanians sing these songs today, they are unknowingly keeping alive traditions rooted in the deep past. The diaspora adds another fascinating layer to this story. Albanians have spread across the world, from Italy and Greece to America and Australia, and yet, wherever they go, the sense of identity remains incredibly strong.